The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by Agile Alliance. If you don't know who the Agile Alliance is, the Agile Alliance is the group that actually started the Agile movement back after the signing of the manifesto. If you're not a member, please go ahead up to agilealliance.org. Give it a look. It's a great community. It's a great place where your support actually makes this podcast possible. So thank you for your membership. I'm currently here in Stockholm, Sweden with a group of thought leaders. Do you guys like the thought leader title?
No. Yes. There's always one.
And what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're just let everyone give a brief introduction of who they are.
All right. My name is Erik Abele. I am an Agile coach of ING Bank in the Netherlands, Belgium.
So my name is Jens Koldewey. I'm an Agile coach most part of my professional life, and I've had the honor to be with this group since 2012.
My name is Jutta Eckstein. I'm from Germany. I'm working as a coach, consultant, trainer, and I'm also an author of different books, and the most recent one is Down to Bossa Nova, so it's about maybe dancing of organizations.
The Agile dance.
Yes.
Hi, this is Björk de Boeksnes from the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. And my book is called Implementing Beyond Budgeting.
Hello, my name is Elena Vasileva. I'm from San Francisco, California. I'm Agile coach.
I'm Martin Florian here, based Stockholm locally, working currently at Spotify, helping teams get the best environment in which they can do their best work.
Henrik Esser Eriksson, we are hosting this event proudly this year. And I'm a manager for a special project, which means I'm a sort of in-house consultant, organization coach. And I've been working on large enterprise transformation for quite a while now. And I'm trying to learn more and share my knowledge.
And I'm Jorgen Hesselberg. I'm the author of Unlocking Agility and the co-founder of Comparative Agility. And I've been part of this roundtable since 2012 as well.
I'm John Buck. I am co-author of the Bossa Nova book with Jutta, which incidentally stands for Beyond Budgeting, Open Space, Sociocracy, and Agile. And I do workshops and consult in that.
Awesome. So this is the Supporting Agile Adoption Work Group. It's an initiative program that's ran through the Agile Alliance. Does anyone just want to give an overview of what we've been doing for the last almost decade of getting together?
Yeah, we always have once a year, we have a meetup where we meet in this wonderful team and we are discussing actually all sorts of things. Usually we are looking a bit in what are the big trends in Agile, what are the big needs in the companies, where is everything evolving towards. But maybe, Jutta, you have been there from the very beginning. You know a bit more about the beginnings.
I'm not sure. So one thing that I find really strong about this group is that we are trying to bring also, different thought leaders is what you used before, together mainly from different companies and companies of a complete variety, as you have probably heard in the opening round. So there is Ericsson, Spotify, ING, Equinor, did I forget anyone? I'm not sure, but they are all in completely different markets, and then finding out if the problems they are having are similar or not and what can be learned from each other, which means it's covering really a lot of stuff that's going on everywhere just because those companies are so diverse.
Yeah, it's very practical, and I think I like the title of the group is Supporting Agile Adoption. It's not solving Agile adoption. It's just about trying to help each other. It's about supporting each other in this journey. And I think part of what we find by discussing real problems, practical problems, is that there are some patterns that emerge. There are certain things we see and we keep coming back to. Some things are probably not as primary anymore. Story slicing is not the biggest problem we have, but now it's bigger stuff. And I think we realize that that takes collaboration. This is not something you can solve alone.
Took issue with your phrasing, we are discussing trends. My experience is that the stuff we discussed here became trends some years later. So we probably were in front of the trends, maybe because we discussed real issues.
And for me, this is very much about connecting the dots. We are coming from different places, different backgrounds, but there are so many connections and so many patterns. And I find that extremely fascinating and rewarding, and there's a lot of learning into this.
And for me as a newcomer, it's my first time here. I really observe that this group is live and breathe by Agile Manifesto. Like we are discovering the better way of delivering, creating software by doing this and helping others to do that. It's exactly what this group is doing. They're doing, discovering, and helping others.
And I think Agile is going beyond the software world, and that's an adventure. And what is all that about has been one of the main things we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's becoming a massive movement, perhaps even. It's definitely beyond software. Yeah. HR, marketing, you name it.
And it's partly because we are moving a bit from Agile towards thinking of agility. So Agile, a bit rooted in the Agile Manifesto, which was built around software development, now more moving into agility because all companies are facing the famous VUCA world, and everybody wants to understand how can we develop the agility to adapt fast and respond fast to our environments.
And as we expand that scope, it becomes very obvious that the set of tools we might have been borrowing or using just in software may not be enough. So it's so powerful to actually bring all those different ideas, tools, thinking models from across the industries and from different parts of research, from psychology to sociology, economics, and think how to apply that in organizations.
We had biology this year.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things, and we invite everyone to go up to the Supporting Agile Adoption initiative page. And what you'll find is a slew of different articles and different things that this group has published over the years. And as you guys are saying, it's kind of interesting because I guess most of us have there's probably more than 100 years worth of practical, agile, and business experience in this room. And that always generates some great conversations. But part of our goal is to amplify to the rest of the world. And if you haven't had a chance to go see some of the stuff that we did about leadership, and we've done topics on what's some of the other topics that are
performance management.
Performance
for example,
management.
is a big thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The AWG was talked about that.
Yeah.
How to take decisions.
Great.
Yes.
Decision making.
And what you'll probably find is, and we noticed that as we've been doing the Agile Coaching Network for, this is, I think, episode 38, it's our 4th year, that some of the topics that we talked about in the initial meetings are starting to become relevant today. And it's interesting that thing about it moving out of software, this is something we've been talking about for at least 5 years. Now, the question that I would probably have as a follow with that, there's a number of topics that we're talking about this year, which I think are totally relevant to that question of, as we start to use more agility within the organization, how does this affect other portions of the organization? For an example, we had a long conversation yesterday on sustainability and how sustainability in developing our products, but also how does agile practices fit into that? Does anyone want to talk about that as far as why is sustainability top of mind for us this year? And what was the other topic we were talking about?
The other topic we talked about was organizational design.
Right.
And we found the Octopus organization. What's that?
So
we should talk about that as well.
Connectivity.
So both of those for us was just, it's interesting because these are the real world problems that you guys are all dealing with currently today in your businesses, correct? Which, you might be there, you might not be there, but I can tell you that every time that we've had Agile discussions, it's always about us. I hear this us and them thing come out. if only those people would change, or if we changed better. And, we can't do a full Agile adoption because the organization isn't designed well in order to go support Agile adoptions. But let's go ahead and let's talk about, so why an octopus as an organizational structure? I'm just kind of curious. How did that come up?
I think the discussion started with the observation that, for example, in our case, Ericsson, it's a super large company, internationally distributed. ING is proudly joining into that club, and Spotify is on its way there. And we are all suffering from the same problem, and that is, how do we keep a super large company aligned without destroying all these great autonomous actions that we have decentralized? So there's a lot of self-organization actually happening, I think, in all of our companies. Because self-organization, by the way, you can never avoid it. People use their own brain. They do what they think is good for the good of the company. So this is a very positive momentum. But while people are optimizing locally, sometimes when we look at a total picture, things are not so optimal. And the question is, can we do something? Can we make this better? And what are the common patterns that we see in our different companies on what this is?
And you were comparing the organization to the skeleton of the structure, and I pointed out that was a very chordate attitude, meaning, where you have bones, and there's also very intelligent systems that don't have a structure or a skeleton for their structure. It's like the octopus, which is the octopus.
Yeah, and it makes it more agile, more flexible.
Yes, right.
Exactly. So I think we started to compare, and I think a lot of people have done this before, comparing organizations or companies to a human body, for example, where we said, like, you have a skeleton, like the organizational structure, and the skeleton is relatively rigid. And a comparison that we had, like, when we want to reorganize at Ericsson, it takes us months, sometimes 1.5 years, depending on the size of the reorganization, because you need to go to many countries. There's legal boundaries and implications and negotiations needed. So this skeleton of the organizational basic design of departments and sections and business areas, it's relatively rigid. And this does not provide the agility that the company needs. So maybe there's something beyond that.
What I found interesting is you started painting this kind of structural picture of your company, which actually was, you're in local markets and there was a central part there. And centralization sucks because you're too slow in the local markets and disconnected from the local markets. And decentralization sucks because, there's too much redundancy in there. And what is the company at all if there's nothing inside there? And so we discussed a little bit back and forth until we decided this is probably the wrong dimension. So we started to add the next dimension, which we equated to the muscles and the movement of a body.
Flow inside the organization, right? Like, we started thinking about not just how the organization is structured, but how does work flow between different parts of the organization? Where does the value chain start? Where they end? We started talking about how those value chains are not necessarily linear anymore, but how today in complex organizations, pulling a lot of things together mean that we should actually be thinking about probably value systems that contribute towards this final outcomes.
And how, in such a structure, how does data get shared? Because that's the lot of the organization. And how do you do that? That's quite complex. Walking up to this meeting this year was fascinating for me to run into Hendrik, and immediately we resonated on that complexity problem that we both face in our companies. So it's out there, and we need to address it. And for me, it's about that information exchange. How can we enable that better?
The most important thing for me was when we kind of discovered that the global improvement, global learning, global optimization, and looking at it in an integrated way, that this is something we probably should give up because it will not be happening on that scale. Therefore, instead, what we need to focus on is really more the local optimization and local learnings that are happening, and more ensuring that the interfaces between those different local bodies, that they learn from each other, and this way establishing global integrated learning and improvement.
And there I learned something from you yesterday. Because
I hope so.
Yeah, because when you said local learning, I was mapping it to hierarchical structures, like local learning in a department or local learning in a customer unit or and over the course of our conversations, we talked about decision circles, groups of people from different departments coming together. And actually, when we talk about local learning, we mean these, learning circles or decision-making circles where you need to, of course, ensure that you have a good participation. So the transport is working across.
So it's local but networked.
Yes.
And the locality is more about the areas of flow than the organization structure.
Exactly.
The system.
We also concluded that there is no perfect organizational structure. So be pragmatic around this, go for the one that has the most advantages and the fewest disadvantages, and then be focused every day on mitigating and addressing those disadvantages.
Would you guys agree that organizational design isn't something you do once? It's iterative, correct?
It's constantly evolving.
It happens all the time.
That was another insight that the learning needs to be facilitated by something. And one important thing is retrospectives, that you do organizational system retrospectives in these learning and decision circles. It's not enough if you just focus on how do you improve your operations, your day-to-day business. You need to also every now and then take a step back and look at the organization as such and see emergent behavioral patterns and things like this, and then adapt.
Which actually leads us to the next level, because, well, we have the bones, we have the muscles, but you can't really tell about the intelligence of a person by looking at the bones and muscles or maybe the color of the skin or whatever. The only way you can discern that is by talking to these people. So what you see and what you're actually experiencing in the market of the intelligence of the organization is two different things. So there must be another level equal to brains. And if you look at how brains work, it's pretty different from how the rest of the body works. And so that was one of the paths we went through.
Yeah, and this is what I really would like to reflect on. This is what John has mentioned. How many brains Octopus has? It's not just one brain. How many brains Octopus has? 9. That in order for organization to achieve this local learning and decision making, it should be gravity centers related to probably the same way how Octopus achieved flexibility and adaptability.
Well, I think that also brings into the, when you're doing this type of work, never do it with just one brain. Have a diverse group of people coming together to have those conversations within the organization. Because I've been through organizational design and I've watched this low demographic of people go into a room where one person does it by themselves and come out as a prophet to say, here's the new design for the organization, and never once looked at and brought the actual users of said org into a room to help out with that discussion. So I think maybe the 9 minimum brain model of the Octopus might be where you should see the dynamics in the teams that you're using.
And I like the Spotify observation that the most stable thing in Spotify is the teams themselves, not how the teams interrelate with each other, that those are stable.
And expand on that. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
I think there's, many organizations have this idea that the most efficient way to use their people is to put them around the pieces of work that the organization needs. But that really leaves out this dimension of interpersonal dynamics and team dynamics. So at Spotify, we really believe in the investment of a group of people working together, and we really want to profit from that. So it makes much more sense to keep those teams stable and together and profit from the investment they've done on working together and make them cross-functional, T-shaped, if you like, to use some of the Agile language, and so that they can really address multiple problems, the problems that the organization has at the particular point in time.
And again, this leads us back to the brain metaphor, because the intellectual capacity of the brain, you can't really judge by the number of neurons that are there, but by the number of connections between these neurons. And the neurons themselves are pretty stable, but the connections are remade over and over again every time we learn something. If we compare that to an organization. It's not about the structure of the organization. It's not about the flow, but it's about the number of connections.
And the reconnecting, which is the cohort learning.
And the speed at which you can reconnect.
That's exactly.
I can give you a sneak peek into some research that we've actually been doing with university this year at Spotify, where we have started looking at the relationship between individual teams' sense of autonomy and their network in the organization. And of course, the naive view would be the team that is least dependent, least interconnected across the organization would be the most autonomous one because they can just function on their own. And of course, the opposite is true. The teams that have the most connections, that those connections happen through most members of the team, are the teams that appear to be the ones that feel the sense of autonomy to the greatest degree. And the teams where there isn't a single person that owns that connection, so it's not a PM or a manager that connects the team with the rest of the organization, but also where those, as we said, like those connections can very quickly change and evolve.
When you brought up the question of the brain and the learning, neuroplasticity within an organization, in order for organizations to move to something new or to evolve or exaptation occur, that neuroplasticity in the organization, some people will challenge back and say, well, I don't have any time to learn or evolve or do these other things. I'm so busy delivering on my backlogs and trying to meet those key dates by, what would your advice be to the people who are stuck in a state where that can't?
Learning is living.
I would say, like this old saying, we can't build the fence, we have to chase the cattle.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which doesn't help us to get anywhere. So often what's really needed, and actually this was also one thing we discussed yesterday, what's needed is intentional reflection in order to find out what needs to be done differently and what has been learned, which was also a big thing that what we all, I think, have experienced that for ourselves, that overnight thoughts or the pause we are having overnight helps us to solve even really hard problems.
Companies need to sleep.
Yes. So
right. And so
sure,
we
go to
need
sleep,
really more to do these intentional reflections also inside companies.
The sleeping analogy we need to explain, I guess.
No, it was just a reflection on what you said, Jutta, that, there needs to be a pause where you can digest all the inputs that you got, also sensory perceptions and everything that was going on, and conclude something out of this. You cannot just keep running.
Right, and if you utilize all the time, then this can't happen.
John gave us a very interesting insight in how neurons are actually, synapses are built in the human brain.
The alpha-neurexin is the first chemical. You think first chemically.
Chemically, and you need sleep for that.
And sleep helps a lot with the process. So sleep and dream is, organizations need that. The teams need that.
So in our discussion, we were talking about that also organizations need time for reflection, and that often we don't take that time. So hence the metaphor of sleeping.
So that's what I meant previously with these organizational retrospectives. It's maybe a practical way of organizational sleep.
Yeah.
Not that you're not doing anything. It's just that you're absorbing
time to reflect.
taking the time to reflect.
Our diagnosis is sleep-deprived organizations.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we see this in all over the planet in different companies where people get burned out and so on, because this level of learning, not building the fence, but chasing the cattle all the time, people are getting really, really tired.
And sleep is a good analogy as well, because humans are not capable of catching up on sleep. Like you cannot not sleep for a week and then sleep for 3 days. So I think the same needs to apply to organizations.
Sustainable pace.
Yeah, there needs to be sustainable pace, and you have to have some sort of good cadence for those reflection points. They cannot all happen for a week every year. It's much better to stop for half a day every few weeks. Actually, something that I do with my leadership team, that we get together at a very regular cadence to reflect on how the organization is growing. And I would encourage more organizations to do that.
Yeah.
You do that at Ericsson?
We have, in parts of Ericsson, we have been doing this where we had like quarterly retrospectives on the organization, and that organization that I was part of doing this was a really healthy organization.
And I think one of the core things, or there are two things I want to add. One is retrospectives is usually connected to team retrospectives, and I think that falls way short of its potential. The really potential great retrospectives are cross team and actually along value streams or even across value streams. And the other thing is, I think there are other ways for an organization to, let's call it sleep, than just doing retrospectives. Hackathon, I think, are a way of dreaming.
Yes.
That was my next point on this, is that during retrospectives, and we've had a lot of criticism that I've heard people call in for the podcast, and they'll say, we do retrospectives, but they're not actionable. We don't do anything about it. But combine the retrospective with dreaming, which is, let's go do something in the retrospective to make this place better. And walk out of those meetings with progress versus walking out of them with just a list of something that you're going to throw over the fence or look at the next time you do a retrospective and go, oh yeah, the 12 things are still there. Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed.
Well, that's the big problem with retrospectives often, that at least I hear from people, that they are not helpful because people do not take the time to really work with this stuff. So it is more like collecting the pluses and minuses, but then saying, okay, and what do we do for the next sprint iteration? Well, we just work on all the minuses and we ensure they are not happening. But this doesn't help. That doesn't lead us anywhere.
Sometimes it's a bitching session. Sometimes,
Right.
Let's be honest. I mean, we actually did some research on this. So what we did is we said, how about we put a neural network on this and see if we can look at certain practices that people do and what has the highest correlation to time to market, customer satisfaction, and quality. And the one single thing that stood out was that teams do retrospectives and take action in a timely manner.
Well,
And that to me was like, okay.
well,
this makes sense.
taking the actions is definitely a very important thing. However, and this leads back to the reflection thing, what I find is even more important is the generating insights. So it's not only coming up with the lists of whatever needs to be done differently or so, but then providing the insights. Why are these things the way they are, and what hindered us so far for not making a difference? Because there might be circumstances in our ecosystem that kind of want to keep it the way it is. So there is stuff where we all think, well, this is bad, but it's for the benefit of something, somebody, whatever, and therefore it stays that way. And if we are not generating those insights, this will never go away.
Jens actually drew a very nice model yesterday. I don't know if you remember on like how feedback in systems work in cybernetic systems. So I found that useful just as a thinking tool. Maybe you can describe those 3 elements.
Well, it's a pretty simple one. One is you have to sense. The other one is you have to process what you're sensing, which means generating insights. And the third one is you need to act, which is actually the cybernetic version of the ODA cycle. So you have that in different variants around. And the core thing there is I see that most informations make a pretty good job in sensing. We usually call that complaining or whining. They may do some job in processing, which is they put it on a flip chart with a plus and minus, but they do a very bad job in actually acting. So taking consequences of what's happening.
That's right.
And I think this is the one thing where really agile organizations excel the others. They are able to turn complaints into insights and turn that into tangible action that really makes a difference to the organization.
But I see also that very often we spend too little time on really getting into insights and we move too fast to action.
Right, because we just have 1 hour of retrospectives.
Yeah, exactly. And some action needs to come out. So there's an action focus instead of an insight focus.
Right.
And I think the insight focus is more important than the action focus. Once you got the insight, the action will come automatically, I think.
And I would like to follow up and dive deeper into what Ray was saying about hackathon as a combination of reflection and dream, sleep and dream. Very often in organization, Hackathon, it's purely like engineering stuff. They're doing something over there. But I really would like to kind of reflect and ask Björte, how in the business agility world, how we can use reflection and dream to bring the entire organization into this participation in hackathon, or bring hackathon up to the business agility lab.
I'm not quite sure how I will respond to that question, actually. I need to sleep a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if I may, there's nothing stopping an organization from doing a design thinking workshop and go to a neutral area that's outside of the current walls of your organization. Get to a place where it's comfortable and nice, where you can actually fantasize. Should you fantasize about your business? Fantasize about what are the possibilities. To add in this space, and I think that, you know, we met with a group of local Agile coaches, and I was listening to them, and they're in the thick of it. They're in the battle for, you know, helping organizations to, you know, be change agents in that environment. Some change agents might say that the stuff that you guys are talking about is a little lofty for them. They don't have the positional power. I've heard others say, not this group, but others have said, how do I do it as a single change agent within the system to have these things come into existence?
We had a session with this meeting with, I hope I may talk about that, with several of the internal coaches, very experienced coaches, very well rooted in Agile thinking. And all of them complained about different impediments they had with the organization. And so we figured out that this is actually the standard working mode of an Agile coach, at least of a successful one, because it's this pain and that actually starts to make a difference in the organization.
If you don't feel the pain anymore, then you stop learning.
Yeah, and you probably stop being out of service. So there needs to be pain within the organization to change something.
Yeah, and pain is a good word because you used the word complain. That's not what I heard. I heard a deep concern for the organizational health.
This may be one of the core differences. Complaining is just, well, the world is bad and so I feel bad and it's you're to blame. Concern is something, well, I want to make a difference.
Yeah, in a way, it was really very positive. I was very impressed.
A simple practical suggestion for anybody who's listening who does retrospectives is when you have your smiley faces and your frowny faces and your pluses and your minuses, ask, what does that say about how we're thinking? How is our thinking contributing to this situation? And can we think in a different way? And then you have a chance to really pop through something new.
And I can tell you one of the strategies I've used in my career has been when somebody wants to have the difficult conversations and I'm not ready for that conversation, it's better to say, look, can we reschedule this and do this at a time when I will be more engaged. There'll be more of me here. But right now, I'm not ready for this conversation, and therefore, let's do it later.
And if you go back to the original idea of retrospectives, that came from Norman Kurth, actually, to the community, he's writing about 3-day retrospectives, and with a lot of preparation up front in there.
And having the nights in between for reflection.
Having sleep in between. And so if you think that retrospectives are just a 1.5 hour thing about filling flip charts, about the plus and minus, it's so short of the original idea. By the way, I may advertisement here, Norm currently needs our help. So we will post a link on that. And if you want to give a little bit back to him, what he contributed to our community, you may want to check that link.
I want to go back to the design thinking session that, Ray, you kind of brought up. And the thing is, I'm always getting a little bit nervous when I hear that. And I'm getting nervous because the way they typically are run, those design thinking sessions, there is somebody who invites to that design thinking session and decides who will be creative at whatever time that has been picked and day. Mm-hmm. And what makes me nervous about that is that it's not based on invitation and it's not an open thing that people can decide kind of by themselves. Is today a good day for being creative and innovative? So I think something like a design thinking session has to take place all the time, and not being something that's completely carved out and it's like a one-time event. And so where I'm heading at is more, well, connected to open space, which is the invitation is open and out there all the time, and therefore people can contribute and bring their ideas whenever it occurs.
I fully agree with that. I just brought that up as one potential method. One thing that we established in the previous Fortune 100 company that I was at, we created innovation hubs. And the innovation hubs were open during the day. And every morning we had anyone who wanted to show up to this lean coffee session. We had just continuous, a continuous marketplace that was open. And there were coaches available there to help people through just even thinking through and getting a slightly different perspective. You know, and again, it's that how much diversity can I bring to the table when I'm working on a problem? The more brains that we have, I think the more creative the solutions come out. But also with that, the company that I was with was also very much a extrovert community. And you get a bunch of extroverts and one introvert at a table. Oh my goodness, you also need the facilitators to acknowledge the introverts, and because there might be some really cool solutions are just, really great ways of, you have to hear the whole organization, I guess is my
We're kind of back from where we were, which is like the local optimization, local learning. And this is really how reorganization, innovation, and the learning is happening in companies. And so just what we talked about is like one example of how this can happen.
Ray, you just said a word that really triggered me, and I think there is, a pattern here emerging. You said you do the innovation continuously. And I think that's the word that we should be applying way more often to everything our organizations do. And beyond budgeting has really led the way here, thinking about how do we continuously think about our budgets or investments. We should think the same way about planning. How do we continuously think about what's next? How do we continuously have mechanisms for learning in the organization?
So to me, many people today start to copy what they call the Spotify model. And Mars is cringing.
Did you have that shirt on? Did you have the shirt on that says "Don't copy me"?
Not my model.
Not my model.
If I'm really looking at what the difference is, it's not that Martin is not wearing a suit, at least whenever I see him, and it's not that department at Spotify is called the tribe. The core thing is, if I talk to a standard department lead in a standard organization, she will tell me something about, we have to deliver that, and should we buy this or build it ourselves, that. So she will be deeply involved in day-to-day stuff. When I talk to Marcian, he is deeply involved in just how to lead this organization and how to change that organization. So I think the core thing of a really agile organization is that the management, especially what I call the upper middle management, is deeply concerned about these topics. How does our organization learn? How does information flow? How are the neurons building? And how can we support building new neurons? And I think that's the bridge to the other thing. And I think this is also a matter of lack of connection and lack of neurons. And that would be the bridge to the part of sustainability.
Which reminds me of the notion we had before about the understanding that it's not about single value streams, but a value ecosystem where nowadays many companies cannot live on their own anymore and do a business on their own. Very often business are created from many different companies joining forces, sometimes not knowing will there be a really revenue for me in the thing, but just in the hope that something will emerge. We go in and create a value ecosystem.
Which is actually, I think, one of the core things that are needed for sustainability.
Exactly. Yes.
Because a company by itself, even if it discovers something which helps to be more sustainable, doesn't really make much difference. It makes only a difference if what that company has learned is shared with the others, and then it's leveraged and really helps sustaining. So then that company, but also the other ones who are in that ecosystem, in that network.
And I think I was in November, I was on a conference called the Innovation Roundtable, and on there, a lot of different companies are meeting practitioners like myself and Marcin, who really are embedded deeply in businesses. And sustainability was a big thing. This is a thing and it's the Innovation Roundtable. So those are the people and companies who are looking a bit forward, what's coming. This is on the agenda of all companies. And when you talk about it, you can really feel how people resonate with the subject.
Yeah, I would think that sustainability will soon decide on the reputation of a company. And if a company doesn't have a good answer to it, then it will have a hard time to survive in the market. So I think sustainability will be probably the disruptor coming forward.
Oh, so just real quick, though, do you want to go into a little bit about what the scope of sustainability means?
Which is something we still need to explore, actually. So from my understanding at the moment, it's one of the things it means is taking full responsibility for the products we are creating. So meaning it's not only important what value are we delivering and if the customer is happy, but also being responsible for what does the customer actually do afterwards with that product. And then also why producing the product, and again, how it's used, thinking about from the sustainable aspect, how many and what kind of resources are actually consumed, and can we do a better job? And well, one way of me saying that is maybe that has to go in the definition of done. Also always checking how are we dealing with resources? What are we doing? How do we consume them? And just like one data point here. So at the moment, there is like one of the forecasts saying that in 2030, it will be IT consuming about 21% of all the energy that's consumed on the planet. So it means we do have a big responsibility here. If we are not contributing to that, well, then we contribute in the other way to it if we ignore that thing.
But at
right?
the same time, IT enables the reduction of
right.
emissions. So
Absolutely.
it's a global ecosystem, and
that's our
we can
chance.
do our part, but sometimes you also need to invest into something to save on the other side and to understand these kind of things.
But if we are not aware of it,
yes,
it will not happen.
Exactly. Awareness is the first step.
Yes.
And again, we come to the point that intelligence is the network.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when societies, countries decide to cut off their networks because we are the best and we need to make ourselves first or whatever, this is actually reducing the global intelligence of human mankind.
Yeah, if you cut the synapse, then your brain cannot communicate.
Oh,
and you
I
get
like
more
that.
stupid.
Exactly.
Well, I think also awareness too, because I mean, as an example, just because I traveled around the planet multiple times, I've seen companies like when their clean water facility wasn't producing for the factory, they were pumping cleaner water back into the ground, replenishing aquifers. But they don't announce that. They don't tell people that they're doing some of these things. And I think even just taking a list of what you're doing today is a good starting spot. But I think for most people, let's say programmers, hardware, software designers themselves, I don't think we consciously spend enough time on, if I write this code cleaner, it's going to execute with less power. Because as you know, most of our cloud-based platforms, especially if we have 1 million users of a particular product, you just think about that unhealthy block of code you wrote being executed millions and millions of times. Right. That's a lot of power. So,
well, which means maybe we have to think of tests as well in that dimension.
Yeah.
But where the thing comes back is questions like data centers need to operate very efficiently. There's a huge question on total cost of ownership, on operational expenditure when you're running these things. And I think these are capitalistic drivers also towards sustainability.
Well, but this is a good point, because there are already also companies looking at this, like running their data centers in a carbon neutral way by having wind farms powering them. And so there are possibilities as well. I think looking at sustainability, and I guess we all agree to that, is not like rolling everything back. It's more leveraging the IT and software and all we can bring to that to make it better.
And I think what's important here, few of us have the possibility to tell all data center companies to go to Iceland, where they actually can take the power out of the ground.
Finland is good too.
But on the other hand, I think each of us has way more influence on decisions. And if you really think about what is in your area of competency, what are the possibilities to say, like Ray just gave some examples. And on the other hand, promoting the networks that make organizations learn, that could be a pretty big contribution to sustainability, especially if you look at the IT industry, which is the core industry today.
I really like this perspective of everyone having a role to play, because I think it's like the engineer can write better code. When you deploy this, you can think about the use of for example, if you deploy to the cloud, it's so easy to think that that's for free. But if you do some auto-scaling, then suddenly you can reduce your footprint. But as a manager, for example, you also have a role to play. We've been organizing some offsites and deliberately chosen to go there by train, for example. Or, think about what kind of food you order for your offsite or for your retrospective or for your lunch. Like we've started with this notion now that maybe by default, or food that we order for lunch and learns is vegetarian.
There's also, we very briefly touched on the political sustainability. If you're contributing to authoritarian systems that reduce the amount of creativity in the populace, or that are used for
Evil?
You could say evil, okay. Sure. Then, are you, you mentioned Jutta, what are the customers doing with it? Is their activity something that you support? Is it in your company's value system for what your products are being produced to be used that way? And what do you do about that?
And an employee, there's been plenty of stories where big companies start using a software or a hardware system in a different way than it was originally designed for. And when employees become activists within their company to say no. And I've seen many a company that big giants you would never have expected to reverse course, they have. So don't think that if you're just a lone person creating sustainability in the organization, the ethics that goes into what we build stand up and raise up against the tendencies or whatever it might be in there. So that's, believe it or not, we're at the top of the hour, and that's all we have time for this episode. Everyone, I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. As we close the last month's, we said that was going to be the last one of the year. So this is sort of a surprise podcast that's your Christmas gift. We did this last year, by the way. Listen to the group from last year. There was actually a really great set of conversations on that as well. If you want to come see me, I'm going to be at Agile Today in India at the end of February. Please come by and have a chat. You guys have a great holidays, and I would like to thank everyone in this room for the conversations that we had. I am deeply, deeply, deeply honored to be a part of this team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.